What if I told you that the laws of physics, the same rules that govern galaxies and atoms, could predict a stock market crash or a total currency collapse? Well, today we're diving into some fascinating new research that does exactly that. It applies the science of chaos to economics, and frankly, the results are pretty mind-blowing.
Take a good look at this image. It might look like a piece of modern art, but it's not. It's actually a map, a hidden map of an entire country's economy teetering right on the edge. This is what pure financial instability looks like. And by the end of this, you'll know exactly how to read it.
And that really gets to the heart of what we're asking today. Can the same science that explains the dance of planets and particles actually give us an early warning system, a kind of heads up for a financial earthquake? We are about to find out. So to put this whole idea to the test, we need to go from the abstract world of physics to a very real, very human situation. We're going to be focusing on Iran, a country where a long-simmering currency crisis has just boiled over, and the effect on people's daily lives has been absolutely devastating. Yeah, this is not just a story about charts and data points on a screen. This quote from someone living in Tehran really gets to the core of it. When an economy starts to crumble, it's felt at the dinner table, it's felt in the local market, it's felt in that daily struggle just to get by. And look, this struggle didn't just appear out of nowhere. It's been building for years and years. As you can see right here on this chart, the number of Iranians living below the poverty line nearly tripled in just 15 years. This is that long, slow buildup of pressure that this new scientific model is designed to detect. So the big question is, how can you see a crisis like this coming? Well, scientists are proposing a new kind of tool, something you can think of as a financial seismograph. It's designed to listen for those tiny, invisible tremors that happen long before the ground really starts to shake. Now, the science behind it is called the Kramers-Moyle framework. Okay, that sounds really complex, I know, but the core idea is actually pretty simple. It's basically a mathematical lens that's been borrowed from physics, and it helps us see the hidden forces that are pulling a chaotic system, like a currency market, in all these different directions at once. Essentially, it all boils down to a tug of war between two competing forces. On one side, you've got what's called drift. Think of this as the stabilizer. It's like economic gravity, always trying to pull things back to normal, back to the average. But on the other side, you've got diffusion. This is the wild card. This force loves chaos. It takes shocks and makes them bigger, pushing the whole economy closer and closer to the edge. The balance between these two, well, that tells you everything you need to know. So how does it actually work? Well, it's pretty clever. The researchers take a slice of currency data, let's say about 2,000 days worth, and inside that little window, they measure the strength of the stabilizer versus the wild card. Then they just slide that window forward one day at a time, measuring it over and over again. And by doing this, they can pinpoint the exact moment that the balance of power between stability and chaos starts to shift. Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. The model spits out this timeline, showing when these forces were shifting violently in Iran. So the next logical step was to lay that timeline right on top of Iran's actual real-world history. The question was, did the model's signals actually match up with real events? I mean, let's just look at Iran's recent history. It's been hit by one massive shock after another. In 2018, the US pulled out of the nuclear deal, and sanctions came crashing back down. In 2019, the government hiked fuel prices by 300%, which led to protests across the country. The model was even tested against future projections, like a hypothetical conflict in 2025 that would obviously send the economy into another tailspin. And the result? It was incredible. The financial seismograph flagged what it calls breakpoints, these moments of extreme instability that clustered precisely around these major historical shocks. So the model wasn't just seeing random noise in the data, it was actually seeing history as it unfolded. And this brings us to the aha moment. Remember that abstract image from the beginning? We're looking at it again. See those dark blue bands? They are not random at all. They are the model's warning signals, flagging the exact periods where that wildcard force was totally overwhelming the stabilizer. It's a direct picture, a visualization of Iran's economic chaos. So, we know the model can detect instability. But what happens when those tremors become a full-blown earthquake? What does it actually look like when the system finally breaks? It looks like this number, -600%. A capital adequacy ratio is a measure of a bank's health. A healthy bank is, well, positive. In October 2025, right before it completely collapsed, Iran's I&A Bank had a ratio of negative 600%. That's not just a crack in the foundation, that is a sinkhole swallowing the entire building. So how does a bank even get there? Well, it had racked up over $5 billion in losses, a complete failure driven by that toxic cocktail of international sanctions and just plain old internal mismanagement. And here's the crucial part. This wasn't some isolated incident. Iran's own central bank warned that 8 other major banks were facing a similar fate. The rot was systemic.
And that systemic failure, well, it brings us right back to the streets, back to the human price of all this economic chaos, and how decisions made in government offices translate directly into pain for ordinary people.
And you don't often see this kind of candor, but in a pretty stunning admission, Iran's own president, Masoud Pezeshkian, he pinpointed a core part of the problem. Just printing money to cover budget gaps. He flat out acknowledged that this directly fuels inflation and, in his own words, takes money from people's pockets.
And you can see the absolutely devastating result of that policy right here. Just look at the value of the Iranian rial against the US dollar. In 2018, $1 got you 55,000 rials. By early 2026, it was nearly 1.5 million. Think about that. Your entire life savings could be wiped out in just a matter of months. When your currency collapses that fast, the consequences are immediate. It leads directly to what that Tehran resident was talking about, massive shortages and soaring prices for absolute essentials. It turns a simple trip to the grocery store for things like cooking oil and eggs into a source of daily anxiety. So when you put it all together, what's the big takeaway here? This new approach, this financial seismograph, it doesn't just explain a crisis after it's already happened. It offers a completely new way of seeing, a potentially detecting the deep structural problems in an economy before they erupt.
And of course, that leaves us with one final and absolutely crucial question. You know, it's one thing to predict an earthquake, but it's another thing entirely to prevent it. If these tools from the world of physics really can give us an early warning, then the next great challenge isn't scientific at all. It's political. Can we find the will to act before it's already too late?